Hey, what's up, everybody? My name's Eric, and if I don't know you, nice to meet you. If I do know you, hey there. So we're going to be kicking off this Bible read-through in 2025, and I'm super excited. I'm going to try to guide and facilitate as much as needed. And I thought I would just do an intro video, and like I said on the webpage, I'm going to try to do a video every week to introduce the week's topics and just keep us rolling and give us some framework. So today is going to be a little bit maybe of a longer video because I want to tackle a couple of different things. The first thing is, well, why are we doing this? Why? So this is a big question for me, and it's really important. I've read through the Bible, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 times in various formats, and the chronological approach is what we're doing this time. I'll speak to that in just a moment. But what is the Bible, right? Some of us have grown up in faith communities that have used various metaphors or symbols or words. And I want to tell you what my opinion is on this. This is my opinion. But the Bible is not a love letter to you, because if it is, it's a pretty messed up love letter in times. We're gonna encounter some of them really quick. Like, it is a messy story sometimes, and it seems really weird to be a love letter to me with some of the things we're going to be encountering, some of the subject matter. It is not a manual for living. Again, same thing. We're going to be encountering some really wacky decisions and some really problematic topics and people. What it is, in my belief, in my experience, is the Bible, and this is really important as we get started in this, the Bible is a record of God's saving activity through history. So this is what happened. This is how he moved in the world. And it's important to keep that in mind to, in my opinion, to not make the Bible be something it's not supposed to be. If you think the Bible is a love letter to yourself, then you're going to, like I said, be challenged when you come across some of these troubling passages. If it's a record of God's saving action in the world, it gives a framework for how to approach it. And I'm going to try to keep us coming back to this, this central theme, if you will. I've heard, I call it the spine. It's the thing that aligns us all. So this is what the Bible is, in my opinion. And so the reason we read through the Bible is we get to know this activity. We get to know how God moves, even when it's problematic. We get to know the type of people he uses and the type of things that happen in the history of his world. So that's why we do it, just because it's important to know our faith. And it's important to have the big picture before we jump into sort of the minutia of, we've all heard, maybe the Bible taken out of context, verses used to maybe exclude certain people or highlight other types of people. And sometimes knowing the big picture kind of is a guard against using the Bible in improper ways. I'm sure we'll come in more of that later. So, that's the why. Now, a couple things on the what, if you will. So we're doing a chronological read-through. If you've never read the Bible before, or maybe if you have, you may not know this, the Bible is not arranged chronologically. If you start reading in Genesis and read to Revelation, even though those two books are sort of chronological in terms of when they were written and everything in between is not chronological. It is not in time order. So what we're doing is we're going to get a sense of how God moved through history in the time period that the Bible was written. So we're going to be jumping around a lot. It's not going to be in the order that your Bible is laid out. So that being said, get a couple bookmarks. Sometimes you might need 4 or something, because we're going to be jumping around a lot. Now, a quick aside, one interesting byproduct of reading the Bible chronologically like this is you get to know your Bible a little bit, because you are jumping around a little bit. Sometimes you're going to have to look at the table of contents. That's okay. So, chronological reading. A word about a word about translations, because I'm sure many of us have many different translations of the Bible. That's okay. I will encourage you to read whatever translation you enjoy reading and that you understand. Those are only two caveats. You got to understand it. You got to somehow enjoy it. But that being said, I'm going to lay out just one quick thing about how the Bible translation works. These are ancient languages. They're not spoken today. It's ancient Greek in the case of the New Testament. It's ancient Aramaic, Hebrew in the case of the Old Testament. There's probably even other languages in there that I'm not even aware of. So it's not easy to translate the Bible. It's not a simple task. In fact, when you translate the Bible, it's not even done by one person. It's done by a group of scholars who have specific expertise in a given book. And then they sort of are the heads. You have a group of people who are translating and in some cases probably debating about the meaning of words and phrases. And then you come to an understanding, and then eventually you get built up a translation. It takes years and years and years to develop a translation. So within that, there are broadly speaking, there's two approaches to translation. There is a word-for-word approach, and then there's a thought-for-thought approach. It's a continuum, okay? Neither side is the, quote, right way to translate the Bible, because if you focus on a word-for-word approach, you might get all the words right, but you might miss the intent or the nuance behind the words. Because again, this is 2,000 plus years ago. People thought differently back then. They just did. They don't think the way modern Westerners think. The thought-for-thought approach is also not the right way, because the truth of the matter is you can't get all the way inside somebody's head. You can't get all the way inside St. Paul's head. You can't get all the way inside Moses' head to understand exactly what they were thinking. But you can get a little close sometimes. So that's the continuum. Now let me give you a layout, just depending on what translation you might have. I'm just going to name a few of the big ones. Over here on the word for word, probably some of the most literal translations is something like the NASB, which is a great translation. It's been around for, 50, 60 years. And it is word for word. It's not easy to read all the time because it's word for word. But it can be really illuminating to see the way sentence structures worked and the way thoughts worked sometimes. The grammar worked. If you come a little bit inside that, you come to the ESV, which is a great translation. I know a lot of people use the ESV, and you do get that word for word. It's not perfect. It's good. It's good. Moving into the center of the continuum is the NIV. A lot of us are probably very familiar with the NIV. It really is the center of thought for thought, word for word, and it is solid, super solid. It's not perfect. It gets some things wrong. But it's very, very solid. Moving over here to the thought for thought continuum, probably the most common, at least that I'm aware of, is something called the New Living Translation. I used that for years, and it is very, very, very good. There's a couple things that it gets wrong, again, because you're trying to divine what thoughts might be intended, but on the whole, super solid. And then all the way at the other end is something called the Message, which is, strictly speaking, if you know me, you've heard me say this before probably, it's not a translation. The Message is a paraphrase, and it was also done by one man, Eugene Peterson. Now, that being said, I love the Message. I've read it multiple times. I use it a lot. Just know that it's one person's perspective, and he's really doing a thought for thought and trying to capture the spirit of how things are written. But Eugene Peterson is no joke when it comes to biblical scholarship. He has the credentials to do a lot of this. So that's that. Just enjoy the Bible that you're reading. Now, as far as this first batch of readings, so I'm going to do, this video is going to cover probably the first 10 days or something, just so first week and a half. We get into the Genesis story, and one thing about the Genesis story, the first 3 chapters, is please understand that the Genesis story is not the writers were not concerned about how creation happened. It's not the how, it's the who. So, was it 7 days? Who knows? I don't know. There's no way to prove it one way or the other. The Hebrew word for days, in the first 7 days of creation, is not just a 24-hour day. It really more indicates like a certain period of time. That could be anything, a certain significant period of time. So a day in the Genesis story could be 1,000 years. Who knows? 100,000 years. Who knows? But that's not the point anyway. The point is who's behind creation. The point is what type of God, what type of God created this world? What type of God created us? What are his characteristics? That's the type of thing. And so we get into the story, and it's not just the creation. We're going to meet the patriarchs, these figures that sort of started the whole story in motion: Abram, Isaac, Jacob, and we're going to get familiar with kind of who they are. And again, this is God's redemptive story. What kind of world did God create? What happened to it? How did it get broken? And what does God do to fix it? That's the whole thread of the story. And then the last thing I would tell you is we are going to start doing this jumping around. So we're going to jump around to a book called Chronological. And don't skip over these. Sometimes the stories are going to be word for word identical, but there will be nuances to how the perspective that they bring. So start getting familiar with that, jumping forward and back. Like I said, send any questions. And then this should take us up, like I said, for the first 10 days. I'll do another video and let everybody know when that is out, when we get into the next batch of reading. So here we go, man. Welcome. This is going to be fun. I'm hoping that we can get together a couple times and just in a face-to-face casual setting, just talk about what we're experiencing and what we're learning. But regardless of whether we do or don't, I'm excited about what God will do through this time, both for me and for you, and maybe for all of us as a group. So peace, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.